we continue our coverage of the 19th annual meeting of Mining Indaba. And I have with me Ric Deverell. He is head of commodity, foreign exchange, as well as Asian strategy at Credit Suisse. And we're going to talk to him about whether there's still a super cycle or not. Ric, thanks for your time. Now, of course, at these gatherings, you have the miners who are the policymakers, you have the diggers, of course, themselves, you have investors, you have brokers, you have the bankers like yourself. Now, you come here to talk about where we're going and some of the major drivers of commodity prices going forward. So just give us top line, what kind of issues you'll be looking at when you do your presentation.
Sure. I mean, I think we're in a very interesting stage in the cycle in that a lot of people talk about the so-called commodity super cycle, whereas I think that part of the cycle is over, and what they really mean by that is that period between 2002 and 2007 where all commodity prices went up. As we look forward, I think it's going to be much more idiosyncratic. I think global growth will remain the main driver of commodity prices, but you will need to overlay that with the supply fundamentals from each commodity. So I think we're in a world where, on average, commodities will go up a little bit, but there'll be much bigger differences in terms of performance among commodities. So you need to look individual commodity by commodity rather than think about it as one asset class.
Yeah. You pick about a big theme that I think a lot of people over the past few years have been grappling with, and we have been hearing a lot less whether indeed still the super cycle is indeed intact. What about the fact that China continues to grow around the 7-8% mark, and we've got the US now potentially coming back and adding to that strength and hopefully demand for commodities?
Yeah, and again, I think what that means from a global level is that we're not going to see a collapse. Last year, a lot of people were talking about the fact that the boom was going to lead to a bust. I don't think we are going to have a bust. I think commodity prices have settled into sustainable levels now. Or to put it another way, I think the lows that we saw in the 1990s and early 2000s will prove to be the historical outlier. But even with China coming back, with the United States recovering, it looks like global growth this year will be in the order between 3.5% and 4%. And that's much weaker than it was in that period between 2002 and 2007 when it was consistently above 4.5%. And in that weaker growth environment, even though it's still healthy, my view is that yes, commodities are okay. Some commodities go up, some will go down. But that really big uplift that we saw in that period is probably behind us.
Yeah. I wanted to ask to break down that commodity pool and speak about those that concerns us in Africa. We're talking platinums, the PGMs, the platinum group metals. We're talking iron ore, which is an important one. We're talking coal and perhaps a little gold. Yeah. In terms of those commodities, are we talking about a whole up, sort of like stability for all of them, or are there specifics within that pool that's going to continue to be driven and we'll see higher?
Again, I think that's a really nice cross set of commodities, and they've got quite different stories. I think platinum, palladium, I think they're quite bullish. Obviously, there have been some supply issues, but ultimately, with very low interest rates, car production globally is picking up quite strongly, and that will support the PGMs, as we call them. On the other hand, I think that iron ore, whilst we've had a very big bounce in the price as we get towards Chinese New Year, a lot of that is about an aggressive inventory cycle. And my feeling is that iron ore will come down quite significantly in the second half of this year. So it will still be a very good price relative to history. But I think when we get to the end of the year, it'll be much more like $120 than the current $150. And gold is another one where gold is still at almost near the historically high levels. We've never been here for this long before in terms of real prices. And when you look at it in a whole bunch of other metrics, whether it's against the price of houses in the US or relative to industrial metals, we're at very elevated levels. And I think the main thing that's driven that is that people have been very worried about the global financial system. And if I'm right and that is starting to heal and people are less concerned about the euro breakup, for example, I think gold will probably peak and will probably start moving down over the next couple of years.
$2,000?
Don't think it goes that far. But I mean, I would not be surprised if you're 20 or 30% lower in 2 years' time.
Okay, so let's talk about Mining Indaba 2030. Now, of course, we know Mining Indaba 2030 takes place against the background of Marikana last year in South Africa, the labor unrest, the cost implications, government potentially higher taxes and all those other kind of issues. From where you sit in London, you talk to a lot of investors, you talk to mining companies. Give us a sense of what they are saying about South Africa.
I think people are very keen to invest in South Africa, but I do think the kind of issues that we've seen in terms of labour disputes, some of the broader issues in terms of, property rights down here have really started to make people quite concerned. I don't think it means that they will not invest here, but it probably means that the hurdle is a little bit bigger. So I still think it's a very good story, but I think that, obviously that kind of issue does cause some collateral damage in terms of international reputation. And I think that the job now is to kind of show that as a country and as a part of the economy that those issues are in the past.
Do you have instances of companies that have looked at South Africa and said, I'm not going to put my money in that dump?
Again, it's an interesting one in that you hear lots of stories, you hear lots of generalities, but I can't think of any specific instance of somebody who's gone, no, actually, we're not going to go there. And I think that's across the board, in that it's not only South Africa, it's the same in Australia, where people talk about the mining tax and they say that there's resource nationalism.
And you are a good one to speak because you're Australian.
Yes, I've Australian as well. But again, I can't really think of a lot of projects that have been killed because of that. I mean, I think the miners make a lot of noise, but I think that if the investment is a good proposition, it goes ahead anyway.
Absolutely. Miners, like farmers, make a lot of noise, and in the end, anyway, we continue farming, we continue eating. Yeah. Ric, thanks very much indeed for your time.
No problem. Thank you.